So, hi guys. I was talking to a couple of my friends the other day about how to bake normal maps from a high poly to a low poly model, specifically in Blender. And there's a lot of weird gotchas. Um, One of them asked me to maybe do a video showing this stuff because I said I'd never really found a good one, and I decided to do that. So here we're looking at Blender, and I've got a low poly model already made, which is if I can remember all my hotkeys. It's actually really hard to remember this stuff and record at the same time. Anyway, so up here we got 4 vertices. It's 2 triangles, just a standard quad. So the high poly version that I want to bake down is, get out of that, is this thing, which is a lot of polys. Basically, I subdivided the surface apparently to 32,000 triangles, and then I used Blender Sculpt tools to just kind of etch some of this stuff onto it in an interesting shape. The problem being, if I were to take this high poly model and bring it into Unity the way a lot of beginners do, this is a huge waste of system resources. A handful of these in a scene will generate a ton of lag and use up a whole bunch of disk space for the installer and a bunch of RAM, and that's not good. So what we want to do is turn this information into a normal map that we then apply to this in Unity as part of the PBR texture or PBR material, and it will look like the high poly version but have the same polygon count as the low poly version. So in order to do that, we need to grab the low poly version, we need to UV unwrap it, which I've purposefully not done so that I could show all of that process. So we just come over here, grab the faces, unwrap, that's it, we're done. We need to create a texture to bake to. So this is called baking demo. I'll call it baking demo normals, like so. And this is the really important step, the step that no one else seems to get. You have to create a relationship between all of the faces in the low poly model and this image that we just created. So to do that, make sure this is in edit mode down here. Select all of the faces in face mode. And then you want to grab this, click here. That's it. You've told Blender that there is a relationship between this face and this image. So now we can go back into default. We want to make sure that both our high and low poly versions of the model are visible. Grab the high poly version, hold shift, click on the low poly version, let go of shift. So you're going to make sure high poly, then low poly, and make sure the icon here is lit up on both. That means they're both selected. Over here to bake, down here. So you want to click on this camera thing for the render options, down to bake. Grab this, set it to normals to tell it we want to bake normals, and we want to do selected to active. So the high poly version is the selected and the low poly is active. And then once we get that, we can tell it to bake, and if everything goes well, you'll see a little progress bar right up there. You'll be able to pop back into UV editing mode, and you see that our baking demo normals now has data. So once that's done, we can go to image, save as image, just pop it out as a PNG. Now here's the last gotcha. When you export this to bring into Unity, you do not want to bring in the high poly model instead of the low poly, and you don't want to bring in them both. So you want to click on the low poly model, File, Export, I use FBX. Click on Selected Objects Only. So once this is checked, the only object that will be exported in your file that you're creating are the ones that you've selected in the list. So I'll go ahead and export it. Pop over into Unity. Now when I bring in Baking Demo here, I'll have to pull out the material. Okay. So I can bring in the Baking Demo model, and it's just a flat plane. I can then bring in the Baking Demo normals file that got created, and I can drag that into the normal map. It'll complain, tell it to fix it, and there we go. 2 triangles, but it has the illusion of having all of the detail of the high poly model. So there you go. Hope it helps.
Peace.